Good luck. Oh, by the way, we talked about games earlier on the topic of what have you. I have not tried Neo the series, but I have watched lots of influencers that I follow quite a bit. Um, Playing Neo 1 and Neo 2. Yes. It does have Japanese audio. Obviously, the game is set in Japan. Yeah. And you probably brought up Neo is because Wolong is the same developer, right? Their foray into the into the Chinese mythos. The Chinese mythos is the next frontier for all the Japanese developers, largely because a lot of times Japanese developers take a tangential leap to Chinese mythos in order to proliferate and expand their repertoire. Oftentimes, the three, in terms of the business sense and reach, the three regions are typically the Chinese market, the Japanese market, obviously homegrown, and then the Americanized market. So the American market specifically. And that's usually the first hit. If they manage to satisfy that revenue, then they can expand to smaller regions. But generally speaking, yeah, Wolong is a natural progression. It is interesting that they didn't go super ham on the Three Kingdoms theme. But Wolong, for the Chinese mythos, for video games, if it's not Three Kingdoms, it's Journey to the West, right? And then for the Japanese side of things, the Shogun period, with some Shintoism and mysticism thrown in, right? For those type of games. Dark fantasy blends very well with the mystique of the Shogun period, the darker, grimier Shogun period as their backdrop. And then like Three Kingdoms, it's a very bloody and chaotic time in the Three Kingdoms where Wolong was the setting, right? I haven't played a while in action light RPG games in a while. I typically aim for storytelling focused games, and oftentimes intellectually forward games. So not necessarily Twitch based mechanical ones. It's been a while. Although the Yakuza series has their light beat 'em up elements, and then most recently their turn-based movement. The Japanese culture has matured quite a lot in the last 3 games specifically, maybe even back to Yakuza 4, quite a bit. When they reached a modern age, it become increasingly multicultural. So in a way, it's really interesting, right? Like a Dragon series features Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, and now in the most recent title, Americanized Asian culture. So who knows? Like a Dragon 9, I have my fingers crossed for another cultural hub like New York City, West, or even California. I mean, I'll take California, but I think one of the biggest cultural hubs is New York City. So it would be really cool. Usually Like a Dragon takes place in cities, like cultural hubs, in order to like really obviously there are a lot of politics and red tape involved in the portrayal of cultural centers and organized crime in cultural centers. So I do look forward to it. I watch a lot of Neo. I know what's in Neo and what Team Ninja has been doing in the past. I actually spend most of my time following developers. I myself haven't really interacted with any major developers. It would be a dream, I suppose, to interview developers on the psychology and the design language behind it. Not so much for the whole hype and popularity stuff. I'm definitely not interested in the business side of things. Oftentimes, I argue for the business side of things a lot of times because that's underrepresented. However, I do like discussing philosophy and design choices with developers. I've talked to here and there smaller developers. So I largely play indie games for that reason. There is often a rare opportunity to interact with developers in the future before they become like Team Ninja or Platinum Games, or Platinum Games would be the other one, right? When it comes to Team Ninja's rival, it'd probably be the next step up is Platinum Games when it comes to development of that subgenre. Anyways, yeah, very familiar with Neo. Very familiar. I forgot that there are to mention when it comes to Chinese things, retro story games are incredible. Not we're not talking about visual novel games here. So visual novel games has been a staple in Japanese development. Retro storytelling games like To the Moon. Recently I played Rakuen, and any of those like Freebird games and Sparrow, like Black Sparrow. There's often a chance that they have very light localizations that are incredibly have a refined attention to detail due to the nature of their storytelling. That can be a wonderful source for opportunities to flex a secondary language acquisition, or practice anyways a secondary language acquisition. And that's my plan for Japanese, by the way. My plan for Japanese is I will be playing these Japanese inspired retro story games, in contrast to a lot of people who keep pushing their visual novel fantasies onto me, where like, oh, I learned through visual novels. Like, I understand that. I'll probably play a visual novel game here and there. It's been a long time. The last visual novel game I played was Steins Gate. So I like retro storytelling game. The next one's probably Mr. Saito, by this single composer, writer, story creator turned game developer. Oh no, I forgot her name. Shigetora? I forgot her last name. She made Rakuen. It's really, really awesome story. Would you ever play yourself, or do you stray from Dark Souls games? I don't. It hasn't been novel enough. I've played a Souls game, and that's about as far as I go for the time being. Projects are very long, so when I start something, it takes like years to 2 years. So I don't stray too far. Like the next project is probably gonna be a JRPG series, and that JRPG series is going to be very long, and it's probably gonna be even longer because I'm gonna try to play it in Japanese. Only this time I'm not playing it solely on the design language. I used to play Final Fantasy games in Japanese, although the Japanese was based on the essence and game design of it. So I was able to play through the Japanese games because I understand game design, right? It's kind of like understanding how to take a test without knowing half the content, or not even knowing the instructions. When you can observe enough, you can play them. So Square Enix, or Squaresoft, is one of my darling childhood developers, and they're arguably at a resurgence, or at the peak of their prior legacy. So it opens up a great opportunity to play Final Fantasy again. And much like a dragon, it takes about a year to do those things. And if I started Souls games again, it's probably the same. I don't play Souls game for Souls itself, as in the game design from FromSoft is brilliant. They're very consistent. They iterate on stuff. I don't gravitate towards developers that iterate on stuff unless they have a long legacy. Now, Souls would fit that bill However, much like the Japanese learning community, right? The secondary Japanese learning community, I do not stick and gravitate towards things that do not have a healthy community. Souls is not a healthy community to me personally. It might be healthy to other people and ideal for other people, but it gravitates towards selecting behavioralisms that I prefer not to interact with on a daily basis. Like a Dragon has its quirks too, like its intense bias towards Japanese or the appreciation of the Japanese language. So lots of Japanese inspired things can be very difficult. Yes, League of Legends. I was a former competitive League of Legends player as well. Dropped that after 12 seasons, something like that. I also played Overwatch, right? I dropped that after 4 or 5 years. And then I played Magic the Gathering. So I've gone through a lot of series of things exposed to particular behavior that I like to take with a grain of salt. So if there's anything that will bring me back to Souls games, is that FromSoft takes a leap intellectually and take a business risk to delve into something. I'm more likely to play Armored Core, Fires of Rubicon, than another Souls game. So the idea is that Fires of Rubicon also involves gatekeepers. So when I talk about video games and breaking into communities with video games, there's a lot of gatekeeping. Learning Japanese is probably in my opinion, arguably the most gatekept language. Because like yesterday when someone said, you're learning Japanese, so you must be a weeb. That's gatekeeping. So oftentimes I love indie games. I absolutely love indie games because they are the start. They are like going to college for the first time. They're like going to a university for the first time. Everyone has a basic level, like have a foundation of excellence or like competence. However, they're going in and discovering the things at the same time. So what is a game that I'll play that you'll probably see me play that has an established community? Hades 2. I will probably play Hades 2 on launch. So Supergiant Games is easily one of my top 20 developers, and they have broke their trend. They say like, all right, Hades did well, let's make a sequel, even though I was expecting them to just move on with a new IP, because that's Supergiant Games' mantra. They make a game, it does well, it's wonderful, it has the patented many design qualities of a Supergiant Games, and then they move on to a new IP. They're breaking the mold this time. Another game that was recently announced was Slay the Spire 2 by Megacrit. So you'll probably see me play that, and it's a really tight subgenre group. So sometimes gatekeeping is rough. And I still think in the early days of communities, there is less gatekeeping. Because it's not their fault. It's not the gatekeeper's fault. It's a conflict of interest. I like being someone who is constantly with a different perspective. So naturally, I come in conflict with well-established communities all the time. Because what do I look like from the outside? Well, if I talk about anime, I'm a weeb. If I'm talking about Chinese, I'm an American Chinese. If I talk about English, I'm not a normal American. It goes on all the time, and it's not a bad thing. It only reminds me of what I am. I am usually that guy that travels from place to place. So I am the nomadic person. I prefer to be a nomad. I go around collecting, if you will, if you watch anime, I resonate with like a character like Gin from Mushishi. I'm more like Gin from Mushishi, or Kino from Kino's Journey, or more recently, Rien from Rien. I like traveling and collecting experiences and stories. It might not be the most exciting thing, and I might seem like I'm not very excited, but that's the essence of the journey, right? Yeah, collecting. So sometimes when you go on a journey and you come in, you are viewed as an interloper. You're generally viewed as an interloper, someone that cannot possess the depth of knowledge that stays in place. So Souls is definitely one of them. Souls community are incredibly passionate, to their detriment as well, for someone like me. People, personally, I resonate with people who are what you would call variety gamers, I guess. Although I feel like that definition has lost some of its intrinsic meaning when it comes to someone who focuses on variety versus someone who plays variety, as in they go with the trends. I don't typically go with the trends. I go against the trends. More now, variety is not hipstery anymore. So closer to hipstery than it is variety. Variety is expecting, variety is a reactionary term now. So if you're a variety gamer, you are a reactioner. You're someone who reacts to new things. A hipster is someone who wants to grab enough essence of whatever they delve with, collect that, and move on. Because collectively, it's the richness. So when lots of people come up to me and say, oh, I'm very good at this game, I became a top player, then I quit, and I'm moving on to the next game to be a top player, I can't resonate with that. I go there, I try to understand enough to feel like I can communicate with them, and then I move on. But my collection will forever shape whatever I do. So the next thing I do, I bring all those stories with me. I really can't recommend Frien as an anime enough to represent what my perspective is. You carry people's stories forward. You spread story and influence. You're not one that is trying to elevate your own status. You are a collector, more of a librarian, if you will. And you can't break into the Souls community or play a Souls game without spending day in and day out being treated like someone who plays Duolingo or use Duolingo. So it happens all the time, every single time. So what I do on my off time? Indie games, because there's no precedence. And sure enough, the indie games that become really popular, they do develop their cultures. What is a previous indie game that I've played? These are not recorded because it was before a time I started recording. Stardew Valley, Undertale, Terraria, more recently, Dave the Diver. Although technically Dave the Diver is a developer that's trying to capture the indie game concept, because Midrock is an extension of an in-house Nexon, and Nexon is a big corporation. However, they're deliberately targeting the indie subgenre. Supergiant Games is great. You have Clay Entertainment in general. Clay Entertainment has spawned many smaller communities, especially the Don't Starve. I started Don't Starve before it was Don't Starve. It sounds like a hipster's humble brag, but I played the game, collected the essence, and have not those communities aren't big enough to reach out to someone random like me, right? So Fatitious, that I've spoken to quite a long time, he really likes Don't Starve. So it was very coincidental well, it's not so much coincidental anymore because I played a lot of indie games. So the odds are I will probably be able to recommend a game or something that I talk about. Much like when I said Black Myth to you immediately after you said Wolong, because Black Myth fills all the checkboxes. So I keep up to date with the idea and information of all the games. I'm inherently a variety gamer, not necessarily a variety player of games. I forgot. Another community that was pretty. Slay the Spire is obviously the deck building community is legitimately built on Slay the Spire at this point. The Darkest Dungeon community, right? That kind of faded. There's also your survival strategy games, like forwarded by the Frostpunk developers. The list goes on, but it's pretty good. And I hope your brother enjoys Hades. Hades is a isometric top-down action roguelike, if we had to generalize something like that. And Supergiant is the contemporary gold standard for that type of genre now. And then there's Risk of Rain, Risk of Rain. So the whole like top-down or side-scrolling perspective going into a third-person perspective. In fact, there's a new indie game that is making that transition now. Hyperdrive. I think it's called Hyperdrive. Lots of wonderful things. Right now though, my 2023 is either Dredge, or Dave the Diver, which I've played up to this point. Dave the Diver is going to see, at least based on how I see the road, like their frequency of updates, they'll have 4 or 5 content updates. So I'll probably end up playing Dave the Diver this year. And then Dredge has 2 or 3 updates soon. So, to give you an idea. But maybe one day I'll come back to Souls again. Here's a hot take, Sub-Zero. If Sony releases the IP to bring Bloodborne to PC, I'll play Bloodborne. I haven't owned a PlayStation console in a very long time. So, since the PlayStation 2. Actually, technically since the PlayStation Portable, because the PlayStation Portable dated after the PlayStation 2. So, if there's a Souls game, if there's a Souls game that might be able to have me play, it'll probably be when Sony releases an IP to hire maybe a secondary developer, or maybe even Bluepoint, to bring Bloodborne to the PC. That is like monumental. So it's part of video game culture and history. So that might circumvent that rough conflict of interest with a closed community. Very hardcore communities are super awesome to watch at arm's length. For someone like me, it's an uphill emotional battle against that. So even I am not that masochistic to go against a closed community, a closed, passionate community. It's already kind of emotionally stressful in a nice way, moderately in a nice way, to learn Japanese with Duolingo on stream. Without a doubt, if you wanted a language, of all the languages you pick, in my opinion, the most eccentrically closed off gatekeeping language is probably Japanese. Both in statistics, in native speaking, like population distribution, it leads to that. And I expect that to some extent. I get pleasant surprises. I mean, I've met you, Sub-Zero, even Jamie, right? Jamie, like Lotus, Indy. I've met a lot of people who are exceptions to the rule. But statistically, from the perspective of the person who encounters all of these, 95% of my interactions are due to gatekeeping. in a very real way, both negative and positive, however you want to spin it. It's a natural process of the human condition. You become gatekeepers when you become incredibly specialized and dedicated and passionate to something. It's very difficult to not feel attached to something you spend a lot of time with. And I'm not that kind of guy who get really attached. I get attached to the person, or the process, the journey of that person. So I don't ever expect people to stay the same. In my opinion, it's a natural conflict of interest. I want someone to both enjoy Souls games and all the other games. I want to encourage them to not become stagnant intellectually. So whenever someone tells me they like Souls games, I will probably try to suggest something Souls adjacent, or maybe even say, if you're feeling really adventurous and you kind of like certain aspects, like after this person describes a lot of the things, well, this game has like 3 or 4 of those characteristics. Are you willing to flex a little to get like a little element of something else, right? That's kind of my personality being projected by using my experience. So as much as I love to spend another year, I think Like a Dragon is the longest I've ever committed to a specific game franchise in my entire life. It only rivals Final Fantasy and Sonic the Hedgehog. Because Sonic the Hedgehog was my first childhood thing. So we're talking about Sonic 1, 2, 3, Sonic Knuckles, Sonic CDX, and then that's it. That's 5, right? And then we have Final Fantasy 1 through 12, skipping 11. And I haven't played a Final Fantasy since, actually, because of the console age. Final Fantasy 12 was the last PlayStation 2 title. And in all the other ones, you had to wait and wait. So I watch everyone play Final Fantasy. Also, another thing is, I like watching people just as much as experiencing it myself. So the whole spoiler thing, I can't resonate with that. If someone spoils something for me, I play the game with their memory and their story with the game. It means that I'm going to have an experience that I otherwise could not have without that person. So it's different. It's a different experience. So if someone like tells me their experience in the game and I haven't played the game, feel free to do so. Because when I play the game, I'll have your stories and your sharing of your time with me when I'm playing the game. This is a good digression. I like this digression. Maybe we'll edit it out and put it as a YouTube video. The idea that when someone focuses, we'll make this about like the end goal thing, right? A lot of times when people play video games and suggest a video game, they kind of desperately project a novelty in trying to experience the game. And I do understand that is awesome when you can. Oftentimes life is filled with so many wonderful things, at least in my opinion, wonderful things. Being able to experience something is fantastic, as in playing a game or making enough time to play the game and play the game yourself. And I understand there's nothing like it. There's also nothing like someone who tells you about their experience with the game when you don't have enough time. So much like Final Fantasy VII, I picked my person that I resonate with a lot in passion and watched him play the entirety of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. In the last, the person is right at the very end, and I'm waiting for their last video on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Am I going to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Possibly. And I think that's probably going to be one of the projects. I'm going to play the OG Final Fantasy VII, the least updated version, on PlayStation because it's not on PlayStation, on PC because it's available. Possibly the remastered version, and then the current version. And maybe by the time I do that, whatever the last Final Fantasy VII is coming out, I'll do that too. That might be a project, possibly. There's another community that I'm still waiting to get updated with, would be Cyberpunk 2077. I am a product and I do enjoy CDPR. So I have played Witcher 1, 2, and 3, and I was part of the launch party, like a launch group of peeps for Cyberpunk 2077. And since then, since their 1.0 launch, right, of Cyberpunk 2077, I haven't gone back, so it's been a while, and I have plans to go back to engage in Phantom Liberty and all the incredibly different changes to Cyberpunk. I genuinely find it hard to gatekeep if you wanted to. I end up bursting out with whatever I found helpful in hopes that others will share the same experience I did. So here's the thing. I know that it sounds very admirable. Gatekeeping oftentimes is very, very unintentional. So for example, when someone says something like, I only want to help, it can still be gatekeeping. So, for example, much like the intent, I feel no ill will for individuals who unintentionally gatekeep. Their passion is the gatekeeping part, if you know what I mean. It's a really endearing quality about human passion. So, for example, when someone is overzealous, they are incredibly wanting to help. However, that also is a form of gatekeeping. As in, for example, if someone needs to learn something and you only want to help, you're going to go out of your way to find every possible way to help them. Gatekeeping prevents the person from experiencing something that they otherwise wouldn't, right? So even then, I actually view gatekeeping as a very positive thing. The thing that I can do my best with, like that I have control over, is to show them that I really appreciate their passion and their help. No. So you have been gatekeeping. However, I love it. I'm a person who's very resonant with gatekeeping because I understand that the best thing you can do to demonstrate how helpful you are is, how much you love something, is to be helpful. And I try my best. Sometimes I ruffle feathers. So I want to warn you, sometimes I'm not trying to act as a contrarian. I want to share and depict that I'm incredibly grateful. Like when someone's really passionate, they also really, really want to help. So the question is, if you see someone stumble on the thing that you really love, and you can't help but go out of your way to help them, that is part of gatekeeping. And I do that all the time. I gatekeep learning all the time. How do I do that? I accidentally, inadvertently offend people about what they know about learning. So when someone says something like, oh yeah, well, I learned the best this way, and I do X, Y, and Z, and it leads to X, Y, and Z, and how do I gatekeep learning? My first gatekeep behavior would be to ask them, well, it kind of looks like you selectively focus on these things based on the things you've explained to me, and just contextually just that, right? All these things, they seem to all have a common element. Have you considered using alternatives that would trigger different types of processes in your in your learning routine? I'm gatekeeping. So what I have done now is that I challenged the way this person thinks learning is efficient for them, to consider other things. There are ways to gatekeep without saying this is the best way, this is the only way, I've done this. Yeah, that would almost be like backseat learning. Yeah, and I personally have gotten used to that. I don't think many people get used to that because they stick to what they're good at. So if you stick to what you're good at and you resonate with the community, you don't ever have to backseat learn anymore. As in, you don't need to remember what it's like to talk to someone who doesn't know everything you know, right? And then when you occasionally go out and see someone learning again, the idea is, oh, I know so much knowledge, I just want to help this person. This person is so good, like they're so passionate, I want them to get to me, get to where I am, so we can appreciate the thing together all the time. And that is the wholesome gatekeeping. I want to destigmatize gatekeeping, because gatekeeping is just that. You want to open the gates, not just keep the gates closed. A lot of times gatekeeping is this like idea of, oh yeah, I'm in front of the gate. You have to prove your worthiness to get through the gate. But there's other types of gatekeepers. There are gatekeepers who want to open the door with you or help you get through the gate so that you can join the community. Still a form of gatekeeping though, in my opinion. Like figuratively, it's still another form of gatekeeping. Is it good or bad? It's up to the, it's up to the people involved. However, for me, I do it all the time. I see myself do it all the time. It feels good. So this very inception point. So this is a point of inception right now. All the things I'm saying right now, I'm legitimately gatekeeping. Like someone can come up to me and say, but wait a minute, Maku, you're making a case to dispel gatekeeping. So you're legitimately gatekeeping. I'm like, yeah, I am. Because I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about understanding the motivations behind people's behavior, right? The motivations behind all the common trends of gatekeeping. If I don't understand this, I'm going to have a really, really bad time streaming. There's no possible way, in my opinion, there's such a small percentage of possibility if you don't understand how gatekeeping works and you want to be like a quote-unquote variety streamer, if you do not understand or intuitively find ways to cope or rationalize why everyone is against you all the time, then you're going to have a really bad time. You're gonna burn out. It's going to be, what's specific coping mechanisms for variety streamers? Like, well, I just like doing what I want to do. If I'm happy and I only need my own motivation, that's great. Like, yes, if you have enough self-motivation to go about, that's fantastic. You don't have, in my opinion, you don't necessarily only have to do that. I think it's a very common strategy. It works really well for those variety people who say like, yeah, your opinions are great, but I have my opinions. I'm going to play this game now. I don't care what you're thinking. This game might be lame, but it might not be lame to me. That kind of helping. But you can also work with it as well. You can improve your variety, whatever. And for me, my choice is that when I go and, I don't know, like low key, if someone makes a convincing enough argument, I'll drop Duolingo tomorrow. Like, I'll drop it right now if someone is able to convince me to do so. And the idea is then I will violate the Duolingo community, if there is one, if I'm already resonating with the Duolingo community, and I will be hopping out of this community and into another community that's well established. Like, I'll drop this right now and we'll start making Anki flashcards. You're leaving one community and you're hopping into another community. So if you're a variety streamer or someone who are a collector of skills, you're going to do this over and over again. It's like going from town to town. You're constantly going to be the outsider, and you're going to spend a limited amount of time to try to not be less of an outsider. Grab as much of that method or stuff you have from observation, and you move to the next town. So every single town you enter, you are literally entering a gate with a community gatekeepers. You have to go in, go back out. And when you leave them, it's also an exit strategy. That's kind of like, do you leave all those people behind, or you pick up some adventures with you? Generally, you typically leave all the people behind. You may pick up 1 or 2 adventurers that join you in the group, but nomadic life is far more lonelier, right? Statistically, you are likely to be less settled. It's the opposite of settling down. And my thought is, you can work around that. You can work with that as opposed to against that. So a lot of times when people say, how do you keep motivated on constantly learning new things? It's largely because the strategies around my life revolves around constantly learning new things. Not constantly getting good at specific things, but constantly learning new things. So how am I happy when everyone tells me the things I do 90% of the time is garbage because I don't understand it enough? Like, well, because I spend most of my time dealing with that, or like maximizing it. So when people now meet me in Duolingo and say, constantly bombard me with, oh yeah, you don't understand, Duolingo's trash, like I've already done this for like 3 years, gatekeeping. Like, well, now I don't use Duolingo, gatekeeping. I'm going to experience this for the rest of my life as a streamer. Like, the content I stream deliberately puts me in front of a gate, at a gate. I might not even ever step through the gate sometimes. So if there's enough pushback, I don't get through the gate, and you lose that. Sometimes you don't ever get past the gate. It's fine. So there are things that I've done, not as much, but most of the time I would say I have like a track record of 90%-ish. There 1 out of 10 chance I might start it and I stop it. O's community is one of them. I stopped at the gate. Maybe occasionally I get a visa and I walk into the O's community for like a month and then I leave. Like, I get pushed. Like, there are lots of signs that push me out of the O's community. So even being I don't know what it is now. I think I'm a 5-digit now or something, right? I haven't touched that thing in almost another 6 months. I might go back in, apply for a visa, look around what's new, and then I'm going to leave again. So that is an incredibly unpopular, very unpopular thing to do. You resonate with the community, you settle down, and you create your niche. I'm basically anti-niche, and my niche is to be nomadic. So what will I do? What will I look like in another year? I have no idea what it's going to look like in another year. I have plans. I can tell you what I have planned. They're in no way going to be set in stone. So I already talked about like Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy VII, what I'm going to do with Japanese in the future and all that stuff. No way is this set in stone. It's nice to have some like defaults. So those are all my defaults, the stuff that I'm talking about now. If Bloodborne gets remastered and get placed on PC, that's a default plan if and when that happens. In another year, I could be on Rosetta Stone using my Anki flashcards and becoming a VTuber. I have no idea, right? There are so many elements that has been presented to me in the future for a while now. Like VTubing was among a lot of those suggestions, right? Or for me, it could happen. I don't know. It takes someone incredibly persuasive, someone who has command of their community representative. Like, for example, I'll give a very specific example that would change the trajectory of what I stream. If someone, like, for example, Maximilian Dude, thank you, Max. This is in the most humblest way. If Maximilian Dude approached me and gave me something that allows me to enter the FGC, then I would probably, the next 2 or 3 years would look very, very different. So I take opportunities where it's presented. I do not pass opportunities. And it's overrated creating your own opportunities. Yeah, the fighting game community. I've actually started with the fighting game community. Outside of Sonic the Hedgehog, I started with Street Fighter. Max is still, I think he's 7 or 8 years older than me. So, there was a time when I wasn't able to, I could have been one of those people who stood there and watch him play at the arcade cabinets. Although we didn't have arcades around where I was, right? And then we didn't have like the luxury of doing that, but priorities were different. So when there's an opportunity that presents this stuff, I'll probably seize it. Other than that, have I tried? No, I have not. But I have advised and watched a personal friend of mine play all of the current FGCs. I do keep up with the FGC. Not in the sense of the people that are in the FGC, but all the relevant titles, right? It's not just Tekken 8 and Street Fighter 6. We still had travel a little bit earlier, and we have Guilty Gear, right? The announcement of a new Virtual Fighter in development, right? I also started with Virtual Fighter as well when it comes to the 3D space because of Sega Saturn, right? And Soul Calibur, right? Soul Calibur. There might be a resurgence of Soul Calibur, who knows, after Virtual Fighter. And let's not write off SNK, right? SNK as well, not just the Arc System Works stuff like Dragon Ball Z Fighters and whatnot, the greater Arc System Works universe, as well as SNK, King of Fighters, right? King of Fighters is pretty hot now because the second, what do you call it, Gauro game is been teased and gonna have some hands-on, right? Gauro 2, which features a certain someone that Maximilian Dude really likes. So SNK, Sam Show was one of the original arcade games that I was exposed to that I really enjoyed. SNK Samurai Showdown. So lots of things. Passionate people are the reason why I'm passionate about things nowadays. For example, my passion for Japanese, it goes without saying. Dogen is probably the centerpin now. My passion for British takes on American English, Lost in the Pond with Lawrence. It keeps going. My science and current events are the Greens brothers, Hank Green and John Green. And I've encountered Hank Green by SciShow, his project, one of his main projects, SciShow, and then all the extensions of it. Then I knew that his brother was John Green, who happens to have written a series of wonderful books. And my favorite of them all, or the one that I even read personally and listened to multiple times, is the Anthropocene Review. And then that led to Fault in Our Star, listening to Fault in Our Star. Haven't watched the movie yet. There's going to be a movie with turtles all the way down. I'm like name dropping all these things, but generally speaking, it's in a very passionate passionate positivity. I rarely name drop too often in public because that kind of is a thing that lots of people do. I think the individuals that I appreciate a lot, they're very humble in nature. I generally gravitate towards people who like to do the things they do with welcome arms to adoration, but generally they're not motivated by adoration. So all the people that I named recently are not in the realm of, in my opinion, appropriately business oriented clout chasers, right? So there is a lot of clout chasing that is very welcome in the career, but I don't think, in my opinion, Hank and people like Hank and John Green are trying to make a career out of something, but to give their life effective meaning and pull in the way they can utilize their influence. Yeah, things like that. And Maximilian Dude is obviously, without a doubt, before he was he's pretty much a juggernaut now as a contemporary middle ground between the gatekeepers and the casual. So he effectively become his position because he can tactfully go back and forth between mediating gatekeeping and increasing casual receptions. So he is the FGC representative that I follow quite a lot. I mean, there are others that are a little bit more hardcore in their behaviorisms. Like, I'm familiar with lots of familiar names like James Wong, and James Wong would be a great one. Is his first name James? Or is it Justin? Not to be confused with the other person who was a YouTube kind of sensation back then, the one that went off to end up directing movies or directing like projects and visual effects and stuff like that. I often get their first names. They both happen to be Wong. So sorry to those people by getting James and Justin mixed up. So there's plenty of that going around, and that's a good place to end as a digression. Shout outs to all those individuals. You used to play a lot of Street Fighter, especially Street Fighter 5. I just can't seem to like the Street Fighter 6 roster. That's fair enough. Otherwise you'd be playing a lot. That's fair enough. Yeah. At the moment, there are the stuff that Capcom established with Street Fighter 6. You will probably see a lot of iterations of that type of system. So perhaps in the future, other like aspired fighting games, maybe in the indie scene or something, may have something to your liking, right? That kind of exudes the same design language. I think the whole drive gauge is an exceptional tool that will be incredibly influential in the future for a modern standard. So I wouldn't be surprised if you in the future will find a title that may exude the same design language of Capcom's Street Fighter 6, but with like different aesthetics or different content, things that kind of resonate with you. That's kind of the wonders of being influential, right? The things you do can ripple, and then people can build on it. To be fair, Street Fighter 5 was like that at launch too. It's true. Street Fighter 5 had a rocky early start. I ended up liking it after 5 years of release since the roster. Yeah. I don't like 10 characters. Yeah, I just don't think like 10 characters enough. Fair enough. Especially when you compare it to SS4. So Street Fighter 6 is here to stay for a very long time, much like Tekken 8. Probably not as long as Tekken 8. Capcom has a roadmap and development cycle that's a little bit more accelerated than Bamco's Tekken, right? And then SNK has an even more accelerated roadmap. So if you want to go on fast-paced rotating and stuff, SNK has a much faster rotation. However, they're probably here to stay for much longer. Yeah, we're all dead by the second and Hina's out. Listen, real talk. Just as a last joke and meme to end this discussion, I don't even know where this discussion started. Oh, it's about video games and like gatekeeping and stuff. Real talk. You want to hear about gatekeeping that is in a positive sense, but also no one talks about all the time? Pick your favorite Valve game. And then tell me about waiting on something. If you want a gatekeeping community that is kind of healthy and constantly making new things, but also constantly inherently being stuck in place because of no new direction, a Valve game. Portal 2, Team Fortress 2, Half-Life 2. Personally, I'm a Portals 2 guy, but hey, choose, right? And I ended up starting with Overwatch, so I didn't understand the legacy that Team Fortress 2 had. There are communities that are there that naturally do not go around and ask people for trying to get into the community, but it is very hard. It is very hard. I was a vanilla Warcraft player. Like, I survived Warcraft. Like, you know, all the current Twitch streamers, when you think about their like the well-established legacy Twitch streamers, the first thing you'll probably say that connects a lot of the like those people is that they either opportunistically seized on their World of Warcraft legacy or they didn't and they moved on to like a different career. I was one of them. At the beginning of my career, I was a vanilla Warcraft player. Like as a gamer, I was a vanilla Warcraft player into the Burning Crusade, and then immediately that was cut short because of my particular priorities. And now I'm back, and ironically, when someone looks at me, they're like, oh yeah, there's no way this person had a background legacy in video games. Like, I do. First Street Fighters, first Sonic the Hedgehog, World of Warcraft, Magic the Gathering. If you expand across all the things, I think the one thing that would probably not be on people's radar, and I would totally not blame them, is concordant, is Dungeons and Dragons. I skipped over Dungeons and Dragons. That didn't happen with me. Now with the resurgence of Western fantasy, I'm more in line with understanding the culture behind Dungeons and Dragons than anything else. Do I currently play any games? Just to wrap up, I currently play Neverwinter Online. You'll see me play Neverwinter Online this April because a new module, mod 28, is dropping. This is with greater than 10 years now. The other one I used to play was Atlantica Online. That was around 10 years. However, this is dropped. This was a Nexon. This eventually became a Nexon-owned property. And I currently play PSO2 NGS. And that's since NGS released. So I guess this would be the third year? Year 3? And I play Hearthstone since closed beta. And Hearthstone is entering 9 years? 9 years? So I played Hearthstone for 9 years, I think. So I'm currently the 3 that I play every day, like, is Neverwinter Online, NGS, and Hearthstone. These are the 3. Any titles that have been like around 3+ years that I've done before was League of Legends, StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Street Fighter, Final Fantasy. The list kind of goes on when it comes to 3+ years. But in terms of current titles, you will probably catch me eventually. It's every Mondays, with the exception of the first week. The first week launch day is Tuesday, and then every Monday for 10 Mondays is usually the cycle for Neverwinter. PSO2 is infrequent. Whenever there's a story update, and it can fluctuate between 5 or 6 months periods. And then Hearthstone, I don't do Hearthstone things. Hearthstone is a closed casual community, and that's very difficult to do. Like, largely there really isn't much for me to talk about. It's a closed casual community. So what I mean by casual community is that casual community tends to not speak about nuances, and without nuances, I don't have a lot to gain from the nuances. Like, there aren't people willing to gatekeep and share their experiences, so I can't gain anything from streaming it. Now I suppose I'll reveal my secret or something of my motivations. Why did I start on Duolingo? Closed casual community. So that means all the people who use Duolingo usually are either new or recent. And the ones that do it habitually, I won't ever hear from. Right? Because you won't. They're a closed casual community. However, since Duolingo is in conflict with a well-established, I can't spell established today, established gatekept community, and the list goes on for which communities. There are at least 5 that are touched upon. Otaku, weeb, serious language learners, LLs, linguist, native Japanese people. That's probably the GOAT right here. Native Japanese people are the biggest gatekeepers. All of this, what it does is when I choose Duolingo, I have increased opportunities to engage in discussion, both failure, mistakes, conflict of interest. It keeps my intellectual purposes in line. When I encounter all of these different situations and more, it keeps me engaged. When I'm doing something for myself, it's not engaging. It's like, I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to expect to do. Without any of these like elements of novelty, it's not engaging to me. So I don't want to do things I'm good at. So oftentimes Neverwinter online, PSO2, NGS, I don't stream anything until it prompts an update that increases the probability of encountering gatekeeping, or like people who have an opinion, people who want to express that opinion. I'm not a popular person, so you must increase the odds of that happening in order for me to be engaged in it. So you won't ever see me stream anymore casually. There was times when I streamed Neverwinter online every single day, and it became that whole, oh, here's the grind. So the people who hang out are like the grinders, like, oh, they're not gonna say anything, they're just grinding. I'm not that kind of person. Turns out I didn't thrive in that situation. It ultimately made me feel like I was grinding, so I put a stop to that. Also, I did play RuneScape. I was one of those people who got to the point of old school RuneScape because I couldn't afford it before I switched over to World of Warcraft when I started making money. In RuneScape, I was the guy that bought all the paid content by using the free content. I was obsessed. Or what I mean by obsessed was I was doing everything the good old youth Asian way. Right? If you think about stereotypes like what is a farmer? I was one of those farmers. Like naturally when someone says like oh yeah, it's weird. It's weird that you've been doing this for so long. Like, how do you do this for so long? Or it's impressive that you're doing so long. It's my one trait. Like, if I have to say humbly, what trait do I have that is even marketable at all? Like, I honestly believe, and I don't think this is an imposter syndrome situation. Not an imposter syndrome situation. If I went into an interview, my interview is going to be around my endurance. The one trait I have is endurance and problem solving, with a side of CC, critical thinking. That is my one trait. How did I get to a PhD in science? It's not because I was exceptionally intelligent or pioneeringly visionary. It's because I had endurance, problem solving, and critical thinking. My communication sucked so hard. I was socially awkward. All that took time. But time gives me an advantage. One day I'm not going to have that. Fair enough. When I get older, you know, when I'm 70 or 80, it's not going to be an advantage. Perhaps my perspective will change. However, juggling, staggering multiple development tasks and skills is the one marketable trait I have. So how could I leverage this? How do I leverage this to make it so that I can leave an impact on people, right? That's what I need in my life. One of the things that I'm dependent on other people. I did mention that there are a few things I'm dependent on other people. One of them is leveraging impact. So what do I do if I'm excel at endurance and multiple skill juggling, right? Multiple skill juggling. I frame everything around it. So how do I frame around this stuff? Habit formation, mental consistency. All of these things are, without saying it too detachedly and unfeeling to those who struggle with this, this is a walk in a park for me. However, I must recognize that how can I distill all of this down so that I can make it useful for other people? What is it easy to quit habits? No, it shouldn't be. It is for me. It's very easy to quit habits and form new habits. It's my one leverage. I play the long game all the time. The long game in the sense that if there's a problem presented to me, I'll switch and solve the problem. That's what I do. I constantly run towards problems to be solved. It's why I love science. Science was fantastic for that. You solve a problem, then you have more problems. You solve a question, then you have more questions. You're constantly running towards questions. So you're constantly having to redefine yourself to fit the thing. So now I do everything to frame around that. So when I review every 25 days, it's going to be different from my 50-day review, my 75-day review, 100-day review. And if any point, any of those things can resonate with someone, I hope they take it and they use it to their own benefit, because that's all I can leverage, in my opinion. And I don't need any more other things to leverage. Life is an endurance game, and it requires problem solving and critical thinking things. So many people said like, oh, well, what's so critical thinking about video games? Have you considered the idea that the way you treat video games may offer you the solution in approaching how you look at life's problems, right? So a lot of times I play video games and draw analogies to acquiring other things using a video game approach, if that resonates for the person. If the person's a tough love, grindy kind of person, yeah, I'll give you a 1,000-step program if you want. Like, that's kind of the idea. I meet the challenge, as opposed, I like to make lemonade all the time. I'm a lemonade sipper. I'm not a ideal power product person. Like, oh yeah, this is almost near perfect product. It's like, I see a product I can use. Like, if you're down in the dumps and you're like at your wit's end, I will still continue to try and change that for better. Like, even if I fail, it's the journey of trying. When someone trusts me to do something with them, I'm not looking for what is it in it for me or what's the value of it. Just doing the thing will create value itself. So every moment, everything I choose to do, like sleeping, inherently becomes valuable. I think to echo one last thing about something, a lot of people say that to be successful, we'll end on this rhetoric. I do enjoy ending things on rhetorics. To be successful, oftentimes other people say you have to sacrifice something to be successful, right? Be it time, money, and dear Lord, family, right? Or you could, by extension, social life. That's the cost a lot of times when people say to be successful. My rebuttal or my counter argument would be, these are privileges. All of these things are not sacrifices. If you perceive them as opportunities. So your success at whatever you valued more is your success. Ask yourself, do you want these things? Right? If you want these things, these are the things that are offered to you in life, right? Hopefully. There's a lot of privileged things going here, but when opportunities are offered to you, you get to choose which one, right? Hopefully you get to choose which one. And even the ones you don't choose, when opportunity is forced upon you, the different perspective is that, how do you maximize things that are forced upon you? Things that are forced upon you can become opportunities. So when it comes to my definition, or like not really definition, but my indicator of a successful person. Oh wow, I wrote definition. My definition of green flags for someone. So if I talk to a stranger and immediately they give me this green flag, is the idea that they assure me, they give me the impression that they can take anything and make it gold to them. That is probably the most secure type of people that I've met in my life. And I've had the privilege to meet some of those type of people, where when they go into an interview and someone says, how do you like, you say this thing, but how do you deal with it? Like, how do you deal with all the people that disagree with you or constantly talk? their response would be something like, well, you know, it is an opportunity to make sure that my perspective is reasonably reinforced. I spend the time that they talk about, understand where they're coming from, evaluate their thing and form a counter argument, or embrace some of the stuff they have. What they're presenting is they're explaining how they either take advantage of it, maybe even embrace it, or refute it. So it's not about how there are things you can't control, like, oh yeah, someone's going to hate you. Someone in the world isn't going to hate you because they're going to disagree with you. It's like, well, how do you use it? How do you leverage that to your advantage? How does it bother you? Well, it doesn't if you're constantly focusing on how to maximize all your opportunities. An argument is an opportunity to learn something. Someone yelling at you is an opportunity to explore your emotional stability with regarding how negative that comment is. When you're pushed against danger, you have to evaluate how you mitigate and address that danger. You are not concerned with the success as in the cost and value of the end game. Like, oh no, you know, what happens if I start learning Japanese and then everyone's going to hate me because I didn't learn a different language because Japanese is a rare language or something like that. You don't concern with that. You learn Japanese and see what happens, because what you can assuredly know as a successful person is you can make it work. You can make it work with or without 100,000 people behind your back. You can make it work when there's one person who's struggling, where you can help that one person, or at least try your darndest to do it. And that to me is almost healthy gatekeeping. So if I'm a gatekeeper for something, I'm a gatekeeper for this perspective. This perspective that if you're telling me a lot of things you want to accomplish and you know you're going to accomplish, I'm going to gatekeep you and ask you, are there things you want to do that you don't know what's going to happen? That you don't know if you like it or not? Generally speaking, the reason why I'm gatekeeping is I see a lack of something. Not that this person isn't healthy or they should go about their thing. I have a natural tendency to point out what is absent when someone is constantly telling me what is present. And if someone is focused on what is absent, I have a natural tendency to gatekeep and ask them what is present. So to tie it back to language learning, so we can wrap up this digression. By the way, if you did ask me, Sub-Zero, what other things I do, or maybe video games I play, the core of my, I guess, channel or something is to collect digressions, and I call them deep digressions. So the biggest category of videos I have are anytime I digress for more than an hour, and I consciously choose when I do those things in order to collect the thoughts. So I probably have like 100+ videos now on like a 2 or 3 hours, sometimes even 8 hours, and we get super engaged in a very specific topic that I rehearsed, practiced, and incorporated new ideas, and some of them might repeat and they'll be different the next time. So this is one of them. And just to wrap it back to the language learning thing, right? The language learning thing. People worry about where or when they are going to get to somewhere. So I often ask themselves, are they happy? Or maybe even like satisfied with their progress or something, their progress with that goal. That's often that word that I've mentioned a bunch of times, which is fluency. Fluency is attached to a time frame. I don't know when, if, or buts about when I will become fluent in any language I choose. But I didn't get to this point worrying about where I will ultimately be, because life is strange. It'll take you in many places. If you ask yourself, you are happy doing this type of thing, that's a green light. That means your expectations are being met. And I feel that a person like that will sustainably be happy. If you're asking yourself things like, if you're saying things like, oh, I have concerns, right? I thought I was going to get here. I thought Duolingo was gonna work. I don't like Duolingo because it wasn't effective for me. Or I tried this and that. And that's telling me that you aren't happy with end goal perspective. So oftentimes then I would suggest, hey, what about process-oriented thinking? Right? Like, was there a reason you spent 2 years with Duolingo? Even though you said it didn't work for you? Like, sometimes time and expectations have this thing about ignoring anything that confirms, opposes your confirmation. So what I do as a gatekeeper, I guess, as a gatekeeper to critical thinking, is when someone constantly tells me what is there, like for example, if someone is constantly celebrating what Duo offers, right? Like, I don't know, vocab and stuff, my natural inclination would ask them, what does Duo not do? And then when someone says, Duo don't do a lot of things, I challenge them by saying, what do Duo do? Like, what are the things that Duo do? The whole idea is that this dispels... I can't spell dispel. Dispels confirmation bias. And it also encourages, it takes me as the source of problems. So, conflicts of interest. I am the source of the problem. I am the conflict of interest. And when you have a conflict of interest, it promotes problem solving and critical thinking. So pretty much, I set myself up for conflicts because I can. I believe that I need to leverage the one skill that I think I have, or I suppose the talent, if someone says that, the one talent I have is to set up conflicts of interest in order to basically talk about problem solving and critical thinking. So everything ends up, in my opinion, like 90% of the things I talk about involves problem solving and critical thinking in the end. So even when someone asks me what my favorite video game is, and just to wrap it all the way back to the very first question, Sub-Zero, in which all this digression occurred, is the concept of video games and Souls games, right? Here's a funny thing. If I don't play a Souls game right now, and that's a conflict of interest, right? It's a conflict of interest. I can explain why I don't, right now. I can explain it. But the question is, can you convince me? Can you convince me to play a Souls game? So the question, what this means is, as long as you don't have the motivation to convince me, then I accept that it is important enough for you to mention. However, it is not important enough for me to play the Souls game. which tells me that you're open-minded. Right? If you're closed-minded, which I had the pleasure and the privilege of encountering many times, it's like, oh, so you play garbage games. Oh, the games you play requires no skill. These are the comments that would come from a closed-minded gatekeeper. This is the toxicity that I'm talking about regarding incredibly passionate but closed things. And oftentimes, I don't even think these are really all that malicious, because honestly, they probably believe it. Like, Souls games require skill. I mean, I'm sure you can resonate with that. Requires skill. It requires some sort of skill. Now, the question is, if I play a Souls game, are you going to play a puzzle game? I have great friends. Very privileged to have 1 or 2 friends who we do not share a single video game commonality. And we can speak about what we like and what we don't like, what resonates with us and what we don't, and counter argue all the time without necessarily entering this type of ad hominem argument, a projection of value. So for example, I like puzzle games. I like deck builders. I love walking sim games, storytelling games. And low-key, this is going to be a hot take, mechanical games is basically, in my opinion, like someone who studies language for acquisition of the language itself. So as much as I love and embrace and am very admire individuals who are mechanical, like linguists, which are concerned with like structure, mechanics, the language itself, I spend most of my time telling stories about the language. It's not going to be part of the language acquisition process to most people. This is suboptimal, as most people would say. Storytelling is suboptimal to language acquisition. Story is suboptimal to making puzzle games with the language. It's suboptimal to think about deck building because native Japanese speakers don't use their language to describe deck building in a casual conversation. Walking sims, and then let's not harp too much on language acquisition. Like for me and my friend, walking sims, my particular friend considered them, I rather watch a movie. A movie. Or a show. Because a walking sim game is pretty much watching a movie or a show. That's a conflict of interest. Does it hurt my feelings? Not really. Am I gonna be convinced to try to gatekeep what walking sim does that movies and books don't do, and then challenge the ad hominem argument like, well, maybe you just lack imagination or etc. No, not really. And having friends like that around me that constantly challenges my own perspective is where I thrive. So oftentimes, if when I get best friends, I do have best friends that resonate with me like 100%, nearly 100%, as in all the things I'm saying now, they would just nod and say nothing, as in fair points. This is a fair point. This is a fair point, and just nods. The way we stay friends is we share experiences. but we often do not delve into like intricacies, like nuances, because those nuances are subject to groupthink. So I have different types of friends, more or less. I have friends that challenge me at every corner because we're not alike. And then I have what I would often say best friends per se, because we resonate all the time. As in, oh, I haven't seen this friend in 3 years, and it took us like 5 minutes to get caught up because it's resonating, right? That's why it's so comforting to groupthink. And just to wrap a lot of the things up, groupthink is what gatekeepers are. Gatekeepers thrive on groupthink. They don't thrive on challenges. So the strength of a gatekeeper is how strong the group is. And with just as a long story short, the Souls community is super strong. And because of it, gatekeeping is also very strong. It's a strong community. Strong communities protect their community. They're very protective. And much like that, which language has arguably one of the stronger gatekept communities? Japanese. And even within the micro communities of, some people would say like, oh yeah, but the Japanese is made of 2 different communities, like second language, right? Second language versus native. The irony here is the native community is even more gatekeepy than the secondary community, the second language community. But this together is hecka strong. Why do I feel this way? A lot of people will probably challenge me on this. Why do I feel this way? I speak American English. What is arguably the least gatekeeping propensity, and this is a hot take, so hot take alert, guys, sorry. Hot take alert. What are the characteristics of the least gatekeeping language? Well, the native speakers are the minority. Maximum number of majority competition. Oh yeah, your American English, it's wrong. Like, it's wrong. Yeah, well, technically yes, because the native English speakers are the minority. Like, if they group together, if the majority competition groups group together, maybe even put in like 2 countries worth, like say Germany aligns with like Italy and throw in France, then you probably have something that competes with the native minority, right? So if there's a language that gets spread out, maybe in the future Japanese will become very, very popular, and then pockets of neo Japanese will be in other places. Then we can start talking about how less gatekeepy Japanese is. It's not the same, right? As an English speaker, the first normalized factor is that you can't inherently successfully gatekeep. It's very difficult to successfully gatekeep. You have more opponents at every corner of the world, like everywhere. So you're naturally, when people talk about English, it's like, yeah, English is kind of a mess, especially American English, where there's, oh, hey, lots of my majority competition. So rules are not salient. They are not consistent. Colloquialism changes all the time, and that mess and chaos leads for inconsistent gatekeeping. And what does that do? It weakens casual input. So when someone says, my English is fantastic, I can't even say that about my own English. So what does that make me? I think I can successfully consider myself as a native English speaker, but native English speakers, I hope the ones that truly appreciate, in my opinion, strong statement here, incoming, that truly appreciate that they have a command of the English language, feel progressively more unsure about their English competence, because the natural state of being an English speaker is that pretty much everyone else has an opinion on English, right? Meanwhile, in Japanese, there is a gate-kept standard. And outside of Dogen, there are some others who are native Japanese speakers, and they evaluate products like this, and the stuff that comes out of their mouth is so disparaging, in my opinion. And I don't think it's coming from a bad place, like bad intents. They try to be helpful, but the thing they speak, the patterns they're saying, is gatekeeping. Like, yeah, this isn't natural. Like, why would anyone teach this unnatural stuff? Like, I guess maybe like English people like this stuff. Like, I don't know. This isn't gonna help you with Japanese speak. So you're right. Absolutely, because your entirety of your language is in one country, right? So that's natural, and it's not to be offensive or anything to anything. I have to accept that. That doesn't stop other people from taking your word and saying this is garbage. Duolingo is garbage and perpetuated by being garbage because it is a closed, casual community. And what I mean by that is there aren't gatekeepers often for a casual community because they're splintered. They're all like collectively going on about their business, and there isn't a representative gatekeeping community. They don't have representatives. Am I going to become one of them? No. I like closed, casual communities a lot of times. So I'm not going to go out of my way and become a representative of what the gatekeeping community would consider as a shill. Like, I'm not going to shill for Duolingo. It is very pertinent that, in my opinion, be important to understand this predilection, because one day, if you find yourself as the outsider, right? If you live so comfortably as an in-group person, there is going to be a chance. One day, if you live long enough, you're going to be an outsider. How do you deal with that? What are your strategies for getting into the inside? Like, how do you start a new skill and get involved in the people who are used to that skill? If you've never run before, how do you start running? Find out, ask the right questions, who to trust or who to start running and getting advice for running if you have nowhere to start. These are the skills for problem solving. What is one of the elements of problem solving? Learning to find information. You might be thinking, oh yeah, I know how to learn to find information. Googling is not what I mean. Not what I mean when I say learning to find information. This learning phrase is anything predating millennials, and maybe including millennials like myself. This is predating and including millennials. Nowadays, you automatically assume this is the most effort you place in finding information. The thing about learning to find information is you need to interpret the information. You need to assess, right? Assess. Find converging evidence. And then null hypothesis test. When I stream stuff, who are my null hypothesis testers and who are my converging evidence? Everyone else. So I deliberately what engages me for life, in my opinion, this will never get old for me personally, until like maybe I'm physically exhausted, is that I place myself as the outsider intentionally. What does that look like? Well, whenever you learn a new skill, play a new game that you otherwise haven't played, as in like you change directions, you are constantly the outsider. When stream goes off for me, off stream, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not doing this when I'm off stream. Like, it's not pragmatic for me, and I need to balance it off. So in off stream, I'm not doing this. I'm looking for confirmation bias, right? I'm doing things I'm comfortable with. So things like enjoying food, resting, being a little lazy, I suppose, and learning more stuff that I know I'm very good at. So to dispel anything in the future, yeah, you know, Sub-Zero, to wrap it up about the Souls game, if you told me it would be entertaining for you to see me struggle with the new Souls mechanics, which I can assure you there aren't new Souls mechanics yet. If you can convince me that Souls have changed incredibly, and that I would be very intrigued and struggling with the concept of Souls game design, which is ironic because we're using the term Souls as a closed community subgenre of understandable standards, then I would say, heck yeah, let's play a Souls game. So when someone approaches me and say, hey, do you like FromSoft? Have you played an Armored Core game? And I'm like, oh, you know what? I might consider playing an Armored Core game because it's something I will struggle with or intellectually be stimulated. Souls game, played Souls 1. And now they're really good at consistently pandering, because FromSoft is very good at that, pandering to the Souls community. And everything, just to illustrate the vigorous passion that the Souls community have, is any design that walked away from the Souls community and tried to increase its influence have met with negativity. That is how you kind of gauge how strong the solidarity of the Souls community is. When DS2 did something different, the eyesore part is the part that it wasn't like Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 3 returned back to form, right? Elden Ring introduced open world design, and that was the least well-received characteristic to the inherent Souls community, not the ones that are recruited by Elden Ring, right? Open world aspect is a big recruiting aspect of Elden Ring. So it's one of those things. Do I want Slay the Spire 2 to be exactly like Slay the Spire 1? I'm an outsider. I didn't stay with Slay the Spire long enough to appreciate that. And sure enough, when Slay the Spire 2 releases in early access, there will be a gigantic amount of community members that will be very strong and influential in trying to recapture the magic of Slay the Spire 1. Honestly, if Megacrit introduced a new deck builder that suspiciously looked like Slay the Spire 2 and title it Our Next Big Game, I'm enamored. Because that would mean that the closed community that is Slay the Spire would not be heavily weighted and psychologically predisposed to trying to maintain something that it was. However, since it's titled Slay the Spire 2, I'm excited for the game, but I also know that it's Slay the Spire 2. As in, there is a hot chance that I won't be as intellectually interested. Much like Hades and Hades 2. I go in knowing that I must try to enjoy it like I was when I'm a selective kid. I must enjoy knowing that when I go into this game, it's going to be similar to Hades 1. And I did manage to do that. Like a Dragon games were like that from the very first game, all the way down to its core essence. So I did spend a whole year focused on a specific design. And even then, Like a Dragon decided to dispense with some of its core mechanics, like the beat 'em up formula versus the JRPG turn-based thing. Their storytelling took a dramatic different leap after the turn-based thing. It still can happen within a game. I don't think Souls game have done that yet. I don't think FromSoft, maybe after Elden Ring, I don't know, maybe Souls 4. Things do come in threes, so the fourth one tends to be experimental. We'll see. I am willing to give Bloodborne a philosophical try because I have been told by Souls fans that Bloodborne has enough idiosyncrasies that it does feel like a different game in design. So there is that. It can't even remotely hold a candle to FromSoft's Armored Core attempt, because Armored Core is not Souls. So there's that. Anyways, 2 hours later, I think that's a good place to stop. I am very interested though, in how people play that. I've watched people play Souls 1, 2, 3, Elden Ring, Bloodborne on multiple occasions, and even through like randomizers for Soul games. My other friend that I have that I keep referring to in the third person, because generally I'd like to keep a little bit of anonymity. My friend is one of those people. They enjoy that stuff so much that it pre-selects out every other possible game type. Like, hey, you should try playing it. It's a hard sell for anything else. When you have a hard sell, or when you ask yourself, it's like, am I interested in this game? It's like, well, I'd much rather just play a Souls game. You are effectively one of those people who love something so much that you will probably inappropriately, but not too offensively, gatekeep unintentionally, right? And that's what I kind of like about it, because when someone doesn't stop talking about something, I know they love it. Like, that's kind of the whole point, right? If you're constantly there was another person who asked about games while I was doing something else, just to wrap up, to draw some similarities. This person said like, oh yeah, I love playing video games of this nature, or like, what are your favorite games? People ask me what are my favorite games when I'm playing other games, right? And my answer to them, the long story short answer, so I get asked a lot when I'm a video gamer, when I'm video gaming, is what is my favorite video game? My like favorite, right? Video game. My long story short answer is the current one I'm playing. And we're not gonna go into this. Maybe we'll go into this when the next video game I play. If I play a new video game, I'm going to get this question again. What is my favorite video game? And I'm gonna say the short answer is the current one I'm playing. Let me give you a slightly longer answer, and then digress into a long answer. But generally, it's the current one I'm playing. And this involves a lot of like how emotional memory works, and so on. There's a lot of deep cuts in here that involve why I choose that the current thing I'm doing is my favorite thing. It deals with the journey, the process oriented thing. I like living in the present and embracing the past and harnessing the past to elevate the present. I like my current favorite game I'm playing is because I played a lot of games before it. So the current game I'm playing, I bring all those experiences to my current game. They represent everything that I've played before. If I choose to play a game, it represents the culmination of all the experiences I had before it. The current me is the most idolized me. It's not someone in the past. I don't think of my past as superior to my present self. Ever. I don't ever think that I would never like one of the few absolutes. I would never look back in the past and say I'm a better person before. I'm always the ideal me now and in the present. So much like things like what is your favorite video game, it's the current one in a slightly longer answer, right? So that's kind of I forgot where I was going with this, but it's something related to this. I left a space down here for a reason, but I just lost track. But that's kind of the idea. To get inside my head, I have to know that yes, there are beautiful games and stuff like that, but generally speaking, okay, let's make a really large thing. My soul's experience I bring to everything I'm doing now. So when I play Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, I make commentary about drawing its comparisons to my soul's experience, or like little tidbits of things. So every time I'm playing, I bring as many experiences as I can with. So souls have left a really big impression on me, right? So it's enough. I even made a comment and it turned into a YouTube short, and people like didn't like it, so fair enough. There you go. There you go. So am I playing a Souls game in the future? I'm always playing a Souls game, Sub-Zero. That's probably the deep cut here. I'm always figuratively playing a Souls game. And everything else. Play, bro? What do you think I'm playing, bro? I'm playing language, parakeet. Why are you in a Duolingo stream thinking that I'm playing something other than using a language? I would like to know. Okay. 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 It's not quite an explanation, but fair enough. All right. So let's finally start our lesson.